And step 11, we need some more parts. So we need the D7 and we need this one, which is the D8. We need some parts from the bags, for the screw bags. We need BA3s ×2, so that's 3 by 15 millimeters, a couple of 3mm washers, and a couple of the BB1s, which are the 3 by 8 self-tapping screws, and these natty little springs. And we're going to be making this. So you can see I've made one up already, and I'm going to show you how to make these up. So you take your D part, your D8 part, or D7 part, in my case, the 8 part, and you place this spring, this natty little spring, over the hole like that. Then you take your BB1 screw and you take your 3mm washer and you pop that over the screw and you screw that down so that the washer and the holds the spring in place. There you are. Then you need to hold the spring and pop the screw through and screw that through the hole. And the idea is, as I'm screwing that through the hole, the spring is being held downwards. For step 12, the bar that goes through, which is a 4 by 95mm bar that you push through the gearbox, like so. There you are. Done. And we take the parts we made in 11 and the 3 by 12mm self-tapping screws, and we're going to screw the gearbox to the chassis. So how I'm doing this is I'm putting one of the components in the side here, putting this on and screwing this into place so it's ready. Okay. There we are, so that's now tight. And then you take your gearbox assembly with this BS4, which is that 4 by 95mm bar. You place that into one end and you place this into the other end and you slot that in, and then you use the other two remaining 3mm by 12mm self-tapping screws and you screw that into place as well. And you do that like so. There we are. And that's now tight. So that is step 12 in there. And now we need to remove these screws that we put in, these 3 by 15mm machine screws. So we need to remove those so that this spring is then keeping this under tension. So here we are, we're going to remove these screws that allow this spring to put that back in there. And the last step for step 12 was to connect the motor wires. And yeah, as you see, motor wires are around, go up through, and they collect the motor wires from the ESC. There we are. That's step 12 completed. Right, we are now on step 13. And on step 13, we are now making some of the dampers. These are the rear dampers. These are friction shocks. Gonna make these up as stock for the moment to see how it looks, and you never know, we might upgrade these to oil shocks later on. So we need some of our components here. We need our coil springs, the BS6, we need 2 of those. We need BA5 3mm nuts. We need the D9 parts. We also need these BS7s, which are the damper shafts, and we need this rubber tubing. And we are going to need to make some cuts to this and 18mm sections to make these little stops here. Okay, so, oh, and we're also going to need C4s, which are the little damper looking cylinders. These are the front ones, and these are the back ones. Right, get on to that. So we need to cut this tube into 18mm sections. So just measuring 18mm with my ruler. Just placing my X-Acto knife on the 18mm mark. There we go, which is there. I'm going to give that a little score, and then I'm just going to roll it around a few millimeters at a time and just sort of carry on scoring. And I'm just pushing and rolling the knife into the rubber and measuring the 18mm to make sure I'm straight. And then once we know we've got a score line around, we can give it a good press through, and it should cut nicely through. There we go. So nicely 18mm, and that's how I've cut the 18mm section on here, and that's how I do it. There we have an 18mm chunk. Super duper. So on the chopping board here, we now have the 18mm pieces of rubber that we're going to use, rubber tubing, which we're going to use on our damper stops. And a little tip from CW01 Creations, the guru, Mr. Peter Smith. He recommends with the leftover of the tube, create some 3 to 5mm spacers, which we then put on the top of the damper. So the idea is on the top of the damper here, where the screw goes through, you then lower the ride height of the car, and what that will do is that will help take out some of that camber that is characteristic with the chassis, and do straighten up the wheels. So great tip from there, Peter Smith. Thank you so much indeed. Always welcome any tips from anyone that goes through the chassis. Goes through the chassis like that. We want to put a piece of the tubing, which is 5mm thick, to lower that. So by putting that in first, like so, there we are, and then putting that in through there, that lowers this end, okay? And then we then put the C4 part, we then put a bit of the tubing, the 18mm, the nut, and then D9 part. All right, so again, on here, we need to put the 5mm size piece on to here. Then we need to pop that through the chassis, like so. Then we need to take our shock body, like so. And then we need to take our spacer, a rubber spacer, 18mm depth size one, and we need to pop that on. So it's just enough past the threads. Then your 3mm nut, there we go, so pop that on there, like so. And then we need to tighten that up, and that, I'm just gonna pop a screwdriver on the other end. A little bit fiddly this bit, that's tightish, there we go. And then we need to pop our spring on, press our spring down, take our D9 part and screw our D9 part on as well. Again, put my box section on the other end, just to hold this nut on here for me while I wind this on. There we are. You wind that all the way up until it stops, and just use a box section at the other end. And if you've got one of these are the ball end, it's like a ball end spanner. This is a Yeah Racing one. You can pop that over the end to help give you some leverage and hold that while you screw the D9 part down. There we go. There we are. that's how you put those on. And then they click into place on the ball joint. And one of my little favourite tools that I've had since I was a wee lad in apprenticeship is an adjustable. There you go, clunk, clunk, done. It's the suspension on the back. There we are. Done. And we're on step 14, and we need to do some of the front steering rods. So we need our BS10 and BS11, which are our two steering rods at different lengths. We need some BS2s, which are these 5mm adjusters that go on the end of the rods. So we're going to have to make sure they're the right lengths. We need a BB4 and a BB5, and they are going to install on the plastic components D3 and D11, which are those guys there. Right, we got what we need. So we are doing the first part of step 14, and that's putting the rod ends into the onto the bar. So this is a threaded bar, so you just literally get this moving with some threads as best you can, and then give it a few so it starts, so it's at least straight, and then we wind these on. It's a case of winding these on so that they are the right length as per the drawing. Well, we're 47.5. Well, not a bad guess. So yeah, we're going to quickly measure these and get these the right gap. And yeah, so just to quickly show you here on the steel rule, I don't know if the camera's going to pick that out, but hopefully it does. It's 48mm is the gap. So that's for the BS10 rod. And this one we need a 30mm gap. And you can probably just about see that, 30mm. There we are. So that's those two set. We now have to do the BB4 and the BB5 onto the relevant D3 and D11 parts. So the first half for this install, you take your D3 part and you take your BB5, use your box wrench, and you could screw that in through using your box wrench. So it goes up, just make sure you get the orientation right. That's the dome effect. You're coming from underneath. So it's a self-tapping thread. Just make sure it's sort of kind of straight. There we go, that's fine. And you just basically self-tap this in. There we go. You notice I'm sort of coming back a quarter turn on every turn that I do. It's just so that the threads can be made. There we are, that's that bit done. And then you take the BB4, which is this stepped screw, and we're going to screw this onto D11 part, and we are going to use this point here. Pop that from underneath, like that. Take our screwdriver, and we're going to just collect the threads. There we are, done. So the idea is it's gonna swing out like that, and then hook in there, so that you can put a pin in. That's the idea of it. All right, there we are. So that's step 14 completed. Foam in place, swing arm in place, and the rod's done. We are now on step 15, and step 15, we need to take the battery holder. We need to take this new part, the D4, and we need to take our right and our left steering arms, and we need to screw those onto the chassis using 10 of the BB2s, which are the 3x12mm self-tapping screws. And yeah, just to show you how I keep those, this is how I sort of organise my screws. I'll use my leftover yogurt pots, clean them out, make perfect storage pots, as you can see. Right, so we'll get on and put these components and complete step 15. Okay, so the first part of step 15 is to take our long steering arm and squeeze this into position. There we go, that's that one. And then again on the other side. Try and hopefully you can see this on camera. There we go, squeeze them on. So that's the two arms on, that's done. Then we're going to take our battery cover. So we've got, there we are, and that screws here, 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 here. We've also got one down the front here, and one down the side, and another one down this side as well. So 7 screws in total. I'm just going to pop most of those in and I'll come back to you in a moment. And here we are, we've nipped all these up now, and there's 7 in total. And it's a case of just going around them systematically, nip them up, super tight, and then just a quarter turn extra. Don't have to go too mad because they're biting into plastic. So that's the battery cover in place, and we have to do the same again with the D4 part. We have to pop this into place as well onto the front of the car, and these are going to locate on these 3 here over those lugs. There we go. And last but least, for step 15, we've got to nip up these screws for the front. There we are, and that's the D4 part now attached to the front of the car as well. And there we are. So that is step 15 now completed. Looks quite good, coming along nicely.